and welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Wednesday, November 3rd. I'm your host for today's program. And what an election night across the country, with the Republicans picking up control of the House and making inroads among state governorships and the Senate across the country. And they're still counting ballots in Alaska and may be headed for a recount in the Navajo Nation's president's race. Linda Lovejoy, the New Mexico senator, and her running mate Earl Tully, a Navajo environmentalist, lost their bid to head the country's largest Indian tribe. With unofficial results, Ben Shelley and his running mate Rex Lee, both recently charged with various counts of misuse of tribal discretionary funds, won over Lovejoy and Tully 33,692 to 30,357. Or 52.6 to 47.4% of the vote, with 110 chapters reporting a difference of about 3,335 votes. Lovejoy, who won a 10-person primary with over 51% of the primary vote, has asked for a recount in that election. And in Alaska, they are still counting ballots as well, though the current incumbent Senator Lisa Murkowski, a Republican, who received the blessing of the Alaska Federation of Natives a couple of weeks ago after declaring a write-in campaign against the Sarah Palin Tea Party puppet Joe Miller, declared herself the winner with a 13,588 vote lead. Yet to be counted are 31,200 absentee and early vote ballots, which could change the outcome of the election. Murkowski won 41% of the vote to Joe Miller's Tea Party percentage of 34% and Democrat Scott McAdams' 24%. And today we go to reporters Mark Trahant on the Fort Hall Indian Reservation and Patty Talahongva in Arizona with some observations about the election and impact to the Native community. Tomorrow we may see Marley Shabala in Window Rock, Arizona, and Larry Townsend from Anchorage, Alaska, with some perspective, and then we can get ready for the beginning of the next presidential election, only 729 days away, and just a reminder that there is only 51 shopping days to Christmas.
Mark Trahant, what an interesting election night. Tell us what your thoughts are this morning about what happened.
Well, first of all, I don't think it's this huge mandate for change that the Republicans are talking about. This remains a very divided country, and it tipped the balance in their direction last night, particularly in the House. But I think it remains a divided country, and I think that's the real issue. Going down to the field of Indian affairs, I think it raises some really interesting, thorny problems. The Senate will be under Maria Cantwell from Washington, and of course her rise to power came by defeating Slade Gorton and his ideas in Washington State a dozen years ago. On the other hand, the House will now be led by Doc Hastings, who opposed the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act. He has been a champion of the anthropologists and archaeologists on NAGPRA. I think it's going to open up a lot of interesting possibilities.
Is the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act on the chopping block with him leading the Republicans in the House?
Well, they don't have the votes. They don't have the votes to repeal it. But this is where it'll get to be a big battle. The Indian Healthcare Improvement Act is only an authorization act. It doesn't carry any money with it. So you still have to go through appropriations to actually put dollars to the things that have been promised. And I think where you'll see that definitely is in areas like behavioral health that are new money. Doc Hastings, actually won't be Doc Hastings, it'll be Interior Appropriations. And that's actually not too bad. The chairman there will be Mike Simpson, who's a representative from Idaho. And my tribe, I'm sure Shoshone Bannock will have a lot of say, at least get him to the table to think about these issues. Tom Cole, who is a Native American, is on that committee as well, and so he'll probably raise some issues. But the Republicans are talking about rolling back the budget to 2008, and I think you have to think through what that really means. That means for the Indian Health Service a reduction of somewhere around 20%, and this is an already underfunded agency.
Do you see the Native community trending toward the Republicans in this election, or For example, in our district, we had a mix. At the National Senate, we lost Russ Feingold. We lost several other people to the Republican changeover. At the more regional level, we retained our Democrats. But from my observations of looking at it, the Republicans turned out their base and the Democrats didn't.
Right.
Where Native voters turned out, they voted Democratic. Menominee Reservation returned about 80%. Democratic vote, and that's a pure district. That's there's not a lot of other people on that reservation, which gives you a cue about where the Native community went. But the numbers were way down.
Right. I think that's true. I'm going to look at the numbers pretty closely in the next couple of weeks, but I think that's true generally. I think of all the places where the Native vote made a difference, they could have made a difference in Arizona, South Dakota, a number of places, but they just didn't have the turnout. I mean, Representative Sandlin Herseth in South Dakota lost, and the only way she wins is with a massive turnout on the South Dakota reservations, and she didn't get that.
Right.
Where you did get Native vote, and I think it'll hold up, is Alaska. And the re-election possibly of Lisa Murkowski will come down, I think, a lot of it to the Village and AFN support. And that's interesting because she is going to owe Indian country big time. And her relationship with the Native community, I think, is going to be very different than it's been.
Right. It's going to have some influence and significance because she may end up being on behalf of the Native community, one of the major spokesmen for it.
Right. It's going to be interesting, though. This is what's going to have to happen. In Alaska, quote, the ballot provision write-in now leads by a pretty significant margin. The lawyers for the three campaigns now will essentially go over every ballot one by one, and the two campaigns that are on the losing end will be challenging every bank ballot. If someone spells Murkowski wrong, if there's some indication that's not a clean vote, there are going to be challenges. I happen to think that's wrong. I think it's pretty easy to tell voter intent, and if someone spells Murkowski in an odd way, but it's clear that that's who they're voting for, that's what ought to count. But that's not the way it's going to happen.
I haven't looked at the final numbers. Is it that close yet, or do you think they're just going to try to eat away at that through the checking these legal challenges, provisional ballots and stuff like that?
It's not close, but she has a good 6-point lead. But that's exactly what they're going to do, is try to eat away at it with challenges.
Okay. Well, we got to touch base with Marla Shabala on the Navajo Nation. It looks like Ben Shelley pulled it off last night, very marginally, but and Patty Talahongva about the Arizona Secretary of State race, just to kind of check in and see what's going on. So,
very good.
We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks, Mark.
Bye.
Patty Talahongva, tell me a little bit about what happened in Arizona last night with Chris Deschane's race and some of the other Native. I know I pronounced that name exactly proper. I know it's important to them, and I don't have it down. But tell me a little bit about a roundup of what happened with the Native vote in Arizona last night.
Well, it was a rough night for Chris Deschene, who was running for Secretary of State. This morning, with 99% of the precincts reporting, Chris has lost the race. He was able to get 41% of the vote. His opponent, Ken Bennett, received 58% of the vote. And again, just 3 more counties that are being voted or being counted. But Chris Deschene conceded the race last night, and pretty early, around 9:30, 10 o'clock, he was already saying his congratulations, at least getting the word out to his people, and they all knew, watching the returns, that he was not going to win this race. Voter turnout in Arizona was about 43%. So one thing that I asked Chris about, the Native vote, did that help him? And he said yes, they did what he asked them to do. They got out to the polls and they voted. But it's interesting to note that in the Legislative District 2, where Jack Jackson Jr. is running, who's also Navajo, he had no opponent there, and so of course got 98% of the vote. But only received 33,000 votes. So how does that translate as far as to Chris Deschene? The other Navajo running for office, state representative in District 2, is Albert Hale. And Albert Hale won 52% of the vote to his opponent, who got 38%. But there again, Albert Hale only received 27,000 votes, which is even less than Jack Jackson Jr. So I don't know what that means in terms of Chris Deschene, but But what it does mean is that even in those districts that are heavily Native, the two men didn't get, again, with 43% of voter turnout, and how many voters are there in the race up there, or being able to cast their ballot, it just doesn't seem to translate as far as the numbers go. As far as the counties and the breakdown of Native population, there are several counties that have large Native populations. Apache County, Navajo, Coconino, Pima, Yuma, and Maricopa. And it's interesting to note that Chris Deschene got a large percentage of voters from Maricopa County, which is the urban Indian population. And then, of course, in the Navajo County and Coconino County, he did receive a fair amount of votes from up there. But again, just not enough to get him into the race.
Right. Do you see any
or get him into office.
Okay. Do you see any reason why Chris Deschene, that this would be the end of his political career? This is the first time he ran, and it may be the testing of the waters in some ways.
Actually, no, he did run in 2008, and so he was a state, he had a state office there in his district, so he resigned that to run for Secretary of State. I asked him last night if he was going to run again, and he just kind of laughed and said, we're not sure. Now, he did tell me that he's going to sleep in today, maybe catch a few movies, and then he and his wife will figure out what to do next. He also said that as a Marine that he doesn't give up the fight, and so will continue to go forward and work hard for people of Arizona and certainly Native people. And he said that it was a tough night for everybody, not just Arizona Democrats, but across the nation. It was a very tough night. But he was very proud of the diversity on the Democratic ticket here in Arizona. So he talked a little bit about that. And he said that right now he is just going to regroup and figure out what his next step is.
Indeed, it seems like analyzing some of the Native vote in Wisconsin, for example, lower turnout for the Democrats, the Republicans turned out their base, changed the election at the national level. The local level was a little bit better for Democrats. So there was a message there, even amongst Native voters, and part of it was a lower turnout. There was not the enthusiasm there on the Democratic ticket this time around. So,
absolutely. And I'm sorry, my phone is ringing here.
Okay.
I think that it's interesting. Again, yes, there wasn't that push. We didn't see that so much in the Native vote. But again, Chris Deschene said that the Natives did get out and they did vote and they did ask what he asked them to do, but it didn't translate into a win and a victory at the polls yesterday. So here's the memorabilia from the race. Again, this is the VIP ticket into Chris Deschine's suite, and win or lose, it was an historic race in Arizona and for Indian country because again, we have not had a Native candidate on the ballot here in Arizona for the number 2 position in our state government.
Well, Patty,
so
thanks.
He made history.
Okay, well, that's part of the whole political process, and I think we all have our eyes on the reconfiguration of the select Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, those House committees that see appropriations for Indian health care and stuff like that, see where it ends up, and we'll work with the system and see where it goes. Patty, thanks for reporting in from Arizona. We're going to do this on a regular basis from now on.
Absolutely, Paul. Have a great day. And election 2012 starts now. Campaign starts today, right?
That's right. Thanks, Patty.
Thank you.
And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to thank you all for joining with us. Come back again soon. Miigwech.